Hello chess lovers and welcome to Chess Insight! In today's video, we will watch 3 chess games featuring beautiful and brutal checkmates, played by players from around the world. Let's skip the small talk and jump straight into the first game. The first game comes from the match between Rudolf Spielmann and Max Walter, played in 1928 in Trenčianske Teplice, Slovakia. Spielmann, playing white, opened the game with the king's pawn. Walter responded with the Caro-Kann defense. Then came knight to c3, pawn to c5, and knight to f3, forming what is known as the two knights attack. At this point, the most popular responses for black are to develop the bishop to g4 or capture the pawn in the center. However, here black chose to develop the knight to f6, and white immediately pushed in the center. The knight jumped into the middle, the queen moved to e2, the knight captured the knight, the pawn recaptured, and then came a questionable move from black, pawn to b6. In this position, developing the bishop to g4 was still possible, but instead black played pawn to b6. This allowed white's knight to jump to d4. Black pushed the pawn to c5, attacking the knight, but then white unleashed a very strong move, pawn to e6. If black accepts the knight sacrifice on d4, the queen will give check to the king. The bishop will block while attacking the queen, but then the pawn will recapture with check, forcing the king to take it. After that, the queen will check again. The pawn will block, and black's rook will disappear from the board. That is why black preferred to capture the annoying pawn instead. But white's queen immediately slid in with check, forcing the king to run to d7. If, in this position, black tries to shield the king with a pawn, the queen will threaten the rook. The rook will retreat to g8. The knight will capture the pawn. The bishop will recapture. The queen will take the bishop while attacking the rook. The rook will flee to g7. The bishop will check the king. The knight will block, and the queen will capture the pawn, leaving black in a miserable position. Perhaps to avoid this, black moved the king to d7. White then pulled the knight back to f3. The king ran to c7. The knight jumped again to e5, the bishop went to d7, and the knight delivered a fork. Black's queen moved to e8, eyeing the unprotected white queen. But white instead attacked with check, forcing the king to b7. The bishop moved to f4, threatening checkmate in 1, while completely ignoring that the knight was under attack from the rook. Black pushed a pawn to block the light-squared bishop's diagonal, but the white queen still slid over to c7. The black king moved to a6. The white knight maneuvered to d8. The black knight went to c6. The queen checked the king again. The king ran to b5, and white pushed a pawn to support the attack. After the king stepped to c5, white produced a spectacular move. You could pause the video here to find it. Yes, exactly. White sacrificed the queen by capturing the knight with check. After the bishop was forced to take the queen, the black king was trapped by the knight. Checkmate. The second game was between Peter Potemkin and Alexander Alekhine. Potemkin, with the white pieces, began with pawn to e4. Alekhine replied with the Sicilian defense. White continued with the Lasker-Dunn attack, pawn to g3, pawn to g6, bishop to g2, bishop to g7, knight to e2, knight to c6, and pawn to c3. Here, white looked ready to build a strong center. Black's knight jumped to f6, but white made a strange move, knight to a3. Playing pawn to d4 would have been much more logical, but instead the knight went to a3. This gave black the chance to seize the initiative. Pawn to d5, pawn takes pawn, knight recaptures. After white's knight retreated to c2, black castled. White finally pushed pawn to d4, pawn takes pawn recaptures, bishop to g4, and white pushed a pawn to chase the bishop. But this weakened the king's defenses. It would have been better for white to castle, develop the knight to e3, or push the pawn to chase the bishop. Unfortunately, white pushed pawn to f3. The bishop retreated to f5. The knight chased it, but the black queen gave check, forcing the king to f2. If white had blocked with the bishop, the knight would have captured the knight. The bishop would take the queen. The knight would recapture. Then the rook would take the knight. The knight would take back, and black would emerge a piece up. Thus, white chose to move the king to f2. Now came knight to b4, threatening the d3 square. White's knight captured the bishop. The queen recaptured, and then a pawn attacked the queen. This further weakened the king's side because the black knight leapt in with check. After the king fled to g3, black produced a fantastic move. You could pause the video here to find it. Yes, absolutely correct. Instead of saving the queen, black chose to capture a pawn with the knight. White accepted the sacrifice. When the knight took the pawn with check, the king ran to g4. A pawn pushed to help the attack. And after the king ran again, the king was finally hunted down. Checkmate. The final game was between Greek Grandmaster Dimitrios Mastrovasilis and English Grandmaster Nigel Short, played in 2011 in Germany. Mastrovasilis, with white, began with pawn to e4. Short replied with a caro-can defense, followed by knight to c3, pawn to d5, and knight to f3. White played the two knights attack. The black bishop pinned the knight. A pawn chased the bishop captured the knight, and the queen recaptured. Black continued with pawn to e6, pawn to d3, knight to d7, and bishop to d2. After the black bishop went to c5, white castled long. Black developed the knight to e7, and white advanced pawn to h4. Black replied with pawn to b5, aiming for counterplay on the queen's side. White pushed forward, black pushed back. After the knight retreated to e2, black castled. White's queen moved to g3, pawn took pawn, pawn recaptured. The black king sidestepped from the queen's threat, and the pawn advanced to h6. Black pushed a pawn. White's bishop went to f4 to exploit the dark square weaknesses. After the black queen went to e8, white slid the bishop to d6. If the black bishop took the bishop, the white queen would recapture. After the black knight moved away from the queen's threat, the white queen would capture a pawn. Black would not only be in a bad position, but also be down a pawn. Perhaps to avoid this, black pushed pawn to f6. But white's knight went to d4, targeting the e6 pawn. Black's queen defended, but the white bishop increased the pressure. The black bishop then captured the knight on d4. White's rook took the bishop. Black pushed a pawn to attack the rook. The rook retreated to d2. The knight attacked the bishop. The queen went to b3. The knight took the bishop. The queen recaptured, and the black rook went to c8. White's bishop retreated while capturing a pawn. The black knight fell back to g8. White's rook lined up on the same file. After the black queen attacked the bishop, white unleashed a brilliant move. You could pause the video here to find it. Yes, exactly. White placed the bishop on f8. This left black completely tied down. Even if black tried to give the king an escape square, the bishop would still go to g7. After the king moved, checkmate would be inevitable. Black resigned to fate, trading queens and allowing the king to be finished off by the bishop. Checkmate. And that's 3 games with beautiful and brutal checkmates. Hopefully, this game adds something new to your chess understanding. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next analysis.